Hello everyone, I'm Jordana Van of Ravenlight Holistic Healing, home of the most comprehensive animal totem and spirit guide information on the web, and welcome to Praying Mantid as a Totem. Now I have two Praying Mantid videos, Praying Mantid as a Totem and Praying Mantid as a Spirit Guide. This is the video that you want if you've always had an interest in praying mantids or you have a history of experiences with them. If instead you're just suddenly running into praying mantids everywhere and you're wondering if that means something, my Praying Mantid as a Spirit Guide video may be more immediately helpful for you. And if you would like further clarification about the difference between a totem and a spirit guide, I have a video about that too, called Understanding the Difference Between an Animal Totem and an Animal Spirit Guide, which you can also find on my channel. Additionally, I'm now offering a limited number of one-off sessions each month. If you've always wanted to work with me but you missed your window the last time, this is your chance. These are available to new clients only, and at this moment only to U.S. residents, though I do intend to return to seeing international clients in the future, so stay posted. For more information, including descriptions of the sessions that I offer, the cost of each, and how to schedule, please visit my website, www.ravenlightholistichealing.com, and click on the Sessions tab. Don't email me directly to ask for this info because I will just send you right back to the site. First, we're going to start with some name clarification. The reason this video is on Praying Mantid and not on Praying Mantis is that while Mantis can be correct, mantises are a specific genus of the order Mantidae or mantids. Mantids as a whole are distinguished by their trademark raptorial forelegs, which mimic the traditional prayer posture, and it is the group as a whole about which we will be speaking today. So while a mantis is a mantid, not all mantids are mantises. Got it? So let's get started. Mantids possess enormous compound eyes composed of thousands of light receptors, whose concentration is greatest at the center of each eye, meaning that their vision is most precise when they're looking at an object of interest dead on. When the mantid detects movement, it turns its head to center the target in its visual field where it can be seen more clearly. Mantids possess the widest neck-turning radius of any insect, up to 180 degrees in either direction, which means they can turn their heads to observe their prey without the need to move the rest of their bodies. This reduces the likelihood of alerting their targets to their presence. Metaphysically, our neck is linked to what we will and will not look at, essentially to what degree we choose to examine ourselves and our lives and the world around us. So, what do you allow yourself to see? And what do you avoid? Most people avoid quite a bit because looking at it too closely would make them feel things they don't want to feel. True awareness of ourselves, of others, of situations can be excruciatingly painful. Praying mantids, with their large eyes and uniquely flexible necks, are not just aware of everything around and behind them, but they can adjust their view so that they can examine objects of interest in detail. Symbolically, this is the difference between being able to see something and making the choice to really look at it, to think critically about it. And there is a gaping chasm between these two states of seeing. Mantid people are primed to really see what is going on in and around them, regardless of how uncomfortable this seeing may be. They are truth seers and truth seekers of the highest order, always wanting to know more. While the rest of the world observes and often accepts without question, or observes and then avoids, plenty of that going on, Mantid people observe and then examine. They ask themselves the hard questions, and they don't flinch at the hard answers. And this doesn't tend to earn them a whole lot of friends among the mainstream. Though people experienced in the rigors of spiritual growth are familiar with the need to sometimes question the most cherished perceptions and beliefs, this isn't true of most people, who will cling tooth and nail to even the most personally damaging viewpoints. When the Mantid person attempts to point out how those beliefs are not really helping the person, or even more threatening, how those beliefs may actually be flawed or hypocritical, people don't feel like they're being helped, but rather that they're being attacked. This is emphasized by the fact that the Mantid person doesn't just see the truth, but they are not even remotely diplomatic about pointing it out. As with other predator totems, which possess strong jaws used to crush and tear, and particularly the mantid, which usually bites its prey's head off, Mantid people are intense personalities whose natural way of speaking can crush another person's confidence and tear their cherished beliefs to shreds. No matter how powerful that other person may be, their egos are unlikely to stand a chance against a Mantid person in the mood to share their observations. Mature Mantid people don't do this to be cruel, nor even to prove themselves right. They're simply vastly more tolerant of the experience of painful truth than most other people. And they don't feel the need to dress it up to make it more palatable. In their minds, the truth is the truth, and as we can only grow when we face the unfiltered truth about ourselves, why wouldn't you want to know? To the Mantid person's eternal annoyance, however, while yes, the truth is the truth and it really will set you free, not everyone is wired to see and explore and accept the undiluted truth in the way that they are. It's simply not part of every person's unique journey. Mantids are so much larger than other common garden bugs, especially if you're a mosquito or a fly, and they are fearless, seemingly entirely unaware that they are insects in the land of beasts. While we are accustomed and more comfortable with to creatures that prey down, which means that they prey on organisms which are smaller or less powerful than they are, some mantids, notably the Chinese mantid, prey up, which means they catch and consume hummingbirds, frogs, fish, snakes, young mice, turtle hatchlings, and other animals that could, if the mantid were to hesitate or falter, destroy them. There's just nothing in them that tells a mantid that they can't or shouldn't, and so they do. Even more impressive, they don't need to chase their prey. They silently stalk and then camouflage themselves in a location where they've spotted a likely candidate for their next meal, and then they wait patiently with their spiny forearms hinged in that familiar prayer pose. When the target's within reach, the mantid strikes so quickly that the motion actually can't be detected with the naked eye, which makes it one of the fastest strikes in the animal kingdom. Impaled upon the lethal spikes of the mantid's forearms, the victim, be that beetle, butterfly, or really beautiful hummingbird, is then rapidly devoured alive. Mantids not only strike with incredible precision, they also jump with singular accuracy, contorting their bodies in mid-air so that they land safely on the most precarious of targets. As mantids are the giants of the insect world, so are Mantid people the giants of the spiritual world. They are capable of attaining a degree of consciousness that the average person, and even those experienced in spiritual exploration, can find positively intimidating. This consciousness, and by consciousness, what I mean is genuine alignment with the divine, is expressed not just in a way of being that tends to run at odds with the societal mainstream and everything that the societal mainstream holds dear, but in what they achieve. There is very little that Mantid people desire that they can't attain. As to the achievement of higher consciousness itself, this, in echo of how their insectile counterparts appear to spend the bulk of their time, is entwined with the practice of prayer. But this is not the kind of prayer that most people understand it to be. The conventional perception of prayer is that we fold our hands, we close our eyes, and then we ask God to give us something that we want. And we think that if we state our case convincingly enough, or if we're worthy enough, that God is going to hear us and change his plan. Whatever you perceive God to be, this isn't really how it works. The universe is omnipotent. It knows and sees and accounts for everything. It has a plan, and that's a perfect plan. And it is not the universe's job to rearrange the plan to suit your desires. When you don't get what you want, it is not that you did not pray hard enough, or that you didn't do it right, or that you didn't deserve to receive the thing for which you're asking. It's that you weren't meant to have that thing because it wouldn't be right for you at that moment, if at all. And so instead, it is your job to surrender to the existing plan, to the infinite, incomprehensible wisdom of the divine, who, whether we like it or not, does know what is right for us. That is what prayer actually is. Not asking the universe to change things for you, but seeking to be the thing that changes. And guys, I'm going to be brutally honest here. That is not at all easy to do. And even those of us who have experienced a tremendous amount of spiritual growth struggle to do this when we have been uncomfortable for a long time. And we can't figure out what purpose the discomfort is intended to serve, or when it's going to resolve, or when we are desperately attached to a particular outcome because every fiber of our being believes that that outcome is the only one that's going to make us happy. Sometimes letting go and letting God, as the saying goes, can seem downright impossible. Nonetheless, it is important for us to strive to surrender all the same, to be the thing that changes, and to do so with curiosity and with optimism. The most traumatic things that ever happened to me, things that were physically and emotionally almost beyond bearing, and often went on being that way for years and years. Things that I did indeed beg God to release me from, yielded blessings that I never could have manifested without those experiences. I just didn't know what I needed to know to live as my authentic self for myself, or to be the kind of teacher and healer that I wanted to be for others. And it was the trauma that taught me. Consequently, it was not until I was able to accept that these experiences were trying to help me and to look for what I was intended to learn that the rewards began to appear. If we want to live an extraordinary life, we have to allow the universe to show us who and what we really are, and all the things we didn't know and could never have imagined. And we have to be patient and curious and courageous as it does so. What I have always found annoyingly incredible about this process is that when we do this, we tend to discover that what the universe wants for us is what we want for ourselves. We just had such a pinhole view of what was possible for us that we weren't even aware of the outcome that would make us happy. But how do we get to the place where we can surrender? Well, patiently sitting in a quiet state of openness and asking for understanding, as the Mantid appears to do, is certainly an excellent start. But for praying Mantid people, there's often quite a bit going on beneath the appearance of stillness. While they may sometimes truly be in a quiet state of receiving, during others they are fearlessly examining the unfiltered truth about themselves, asking themselves those painful questions and determinedly following the answers down the deepest, darkest internal rabbit holes. In so doing, they learn to spot and analyze and release their limiting beliefs, those things that they believe about themselves and their lives and the world that, no matter how much physical or historical evidence exists in their favor, are not necessarily true. These limiting beliefs are what keep us trying to adhere to a mental agenda rather than a divine one. The mind gathers what data it can, and then it guesses and hopes and struggles and ruminates, but the spirit knows, and the spirit moves in peace and ease. When we trust the universe rather than our limited conceptions of self and reality, we do the impossible. We connect with desires we never knew we had, and we reach for things conventional wisdom would have said is unattainable. And we take paths to get there that logic could not have possibly foreseen. We confront and we risk and we leap, knowing that somehow we will land safely. And rather than stressing and forcing, we follow one right feeling, though not necessarily right looking, step after another, and we wind up right where we are supposed to be. When the thing we want arrives, we simply and unhesitatingly reach out and grab it. It may seem to outsiders as though the most incredible of gifts simply landed in our laps and that we didn't have to work for it at all. But within ourselves, a vast amount of personal preparation occurred in order to open us up to its receipt and then move us into the position to receive it. The Greek word mantis means one who divines, a seer, a prophet. Prophets are those who hear the wisdom of the divine and who speak on its behalf, making them the truth receivers and truth speakers of existence. But the term mantis itself has its roots in another Greek word meaning to be mad. And in ancient Greece, prophesying was sometimes believed to be the result of inspired madness. For those traveling the road to enlightenment, the ever-evolving state in which we release societal conceptions of what was and what is and what can be, and we harmonize with cosmic truth, a period of madness is unavoidable. How not, when suddenly you're questioning every freaking thing you have ever learned or believed or been told? And I really do mean everything. I have lived this myself, and it is cray-cray on toast. First, your whole conception of self and reality begins to unravel, and then there's indescribable existential panic, which is every bit as much fun as it sounds. When you finally calm down and you begin to hear that still, small voice of the divine within you, you realize that you know that certain things are true and that others are not. And yet everyone around you is happily drinking the cultural Kool-Aid, and more seems convinced that you are a lunatic. You often wonder if you're a lunatic, and yet you can't change what you know deep inside. As you move through your madness, you're going to be more or less able to function in modern society. Some people experience only a minor or moderate realignment of truth. They begin to understand certain critical things about existence, and they make changes as a result. But the demands of self-exploration and transformation are never so dramatic that they must retreat fully from the world, and they remain unconscious participants in significant cultural and personal myths. Their journey may involve their becoming a bit of a black sheep in the family, or maybe the neighborhood hippie, but for the most part, they don't have to work to pass for normal. Mantid people are among those who seek and experience divine truth to such an extent that for at least part of their lives, they're not able to be in society and must live alone or with a very tolerant, very independent partner. The depth of their madness, which is actually not madness, but an almost violent sanity, is such that the world at large becomes insufferable. There's a good reason that when we think of prophets and seers, most of us call to mind the image of a childless old man or an aged crone living by him or herself in the wilderness. To connect with truth to the degree that Mantid people do, they must undergo a time of intense, uninterrupted contemplation of self, and that can only occur alone. And often it has to be far away from other people. Only someone who not only enjoys being alone, but thrives will succeed here. Simplicity is also a factor. Life must not demand so much of them that it detracts from penetrating introspection. More social or sensation-seeking individuals who will become starved for stimulation in these circumstances will interrupt their prayer all too often, their hunger for the world outside greater than for that within. Now, mantids are heavily antagonistic. The instant they hatch, they will proceed to eat as many of their siblings as they can. And if you put more than one mantid together in an enclosure, one of them is eventually going to become the other's dinner. Anything and everything that they can grab, including other mantids, is prey and devoured accordingly. Mantid people, by extension, are highly protective of their space. This is to prepare them for the internal journey that will consume much of their lives. When self-exploration is your reason for being, the unyielding enforcement of personal boundaries is absolutely vital. Coupled with this is the mantid's flawless camouflage. Mantids are colored and shaped like green leaves or dead sticks, moss, even flowers. When they position themselves in the foliage they resemble, their stillness renders them invisible. This is what allows them to be such successful hunters. Now, if they leave the area in which they naturally blend in, moving from a space of green leaves to one of flowers, for example, then they're going to be visible to predators such as songbirds, and they themselves will become an easy meal. For all that mantid people often do the extraordinary, this is not a lifetime of notoriety. They are very private people, happiest in their own homes and their own company, where they are safe from the demands of other humans. If something they do does manage to catch the attention of the world at large, you aren't going to see them on the news joyfully talking about their success. Chances are they won't mention it to anyone at all. This is for the sake of their mental and physical health. When your accomplishments are based on having sufficient time and solitude to be able to develop a level of spiritual consciousness that most people can't even begin to comprehend, let alone attain, social interactions will quickly rob you of your ability to do what you came here to do. So for this reason, the demands of prolonged fame would be absolutely toxic for mantid people, particularly in this technologically invasive day and age in which we find ourselves. Fortunately, mantid people, or fortunately for them, mantid people have a clinical rather than emotional approach to life and other people. These are not warm and fuzzy sorts, easily derailed from their own goals by a conflicting desire to care for others or by fear of being judged for seeming selfish. Here in the United States, Chinese mantids were accidentally imported from overseas and then intentionally imported in the mistaken belief that they would help reduce the population of agricultural pests. But not only did they destroy the pests, they also killed and consumed much needed beneficial insects with equal ardor, including our native praying mantids. And so again, mantid people are not here to be our heroes. They may engage in what looks like teaching now and again by sharing a truth they've observed, but that truth is as likely to cut you to pieces as it is to provide revelation. Their lives and their learning are ultimately for themselves alone. Now, mantid people don't have a lot of vulnerabilities. Occasionally, they're going to encounter someone incapable of giving them a taste of their own truth-flavored medicine, and this is understandably pretty devastating. When you're used to being the one with all the answers, it stings to have someone point out something you missed in yourself. Fortunately for the mantid person, this will tend to happen less and less as they grow older and wiser. Their conviction that they can do anything, however, an experience that bears that out, poses a more consistent threat. It really is a double-edged sword. In ancient China and Japan, the mantid was a symbol of strength, courage, and boldness. But though these were considered laudable qualities, they were also viewed as stemming from foolishness. In one particular story from 2nd century BC China, a duke who went hunting was surprised to see an insect in the road, raising its arms as though to prevent his chariot from passing. When he questioned the charioteer, the man said, "Ah, that is a mantis. It is an insect who knows how to advance, but will never know how to retreat. And without measuring its strength, it easily offers resistance." Basically, this is a bug that has no idea how small it really is and therefore behaves as though it is invincible. Marveling at the creature's boldness, the Duke declared that if the mantis were a man, he would be the champion hero of the empire, and he turned his chariot to avoid squashing the little guy. Lucky Mantid. The mantis would not have succeeded in stopping the chariot if he tried, but were he a warrior instead of an insect, such obliviousness to his limitations could win him many battles. Could being the operative word here. He might just as easily be slaughtered in the first 2 seconds by the superior force his reckless courage prompted him to engage. Did our little mantis know on some level that the Duke would turn the chariot, or was it just dumb luck? Chances are, if he repeated the mantid versus chariot experience for the next 5 vehicles down the road, it would be the last thing he ever did. For mantid people, though they are capable of tremendous accomplishments, success is not a given. It hinges upon developing the understanding that just because they are sure they can do something does not necessarily mean that they should. What we are looking at here is the difference between spirit and ego. Spirit says, do it, and you do it because the thing itself feels right, not because you know what the outcome will be. When we have truly surrendered to that divine plan, we know that no outcome is certain, and further that the best outcome is going to occur if we release our attachment to the outcome we think we want. This is because letting go of what we think we want allows us to receive what we would actually have wanted if we had known better. And I know, guys, it breaks my brain sometimes too. To get what you want, you have to let go of you want. I mean, who the hell came up with that? Anyway, so spirit says do, and you do it for that reason alone. Ego, however, which is the part of ourselves that tries to play by an inflexible set of rules that it believes will keep us safe, is attached to an outcome. It wants to do the thing not because it feels right, but because of what it believes it will get as a result. So this would be the difference between running a marathon, because we know deep inside we need to run a marathon, that something about the idea really feels good, and deciding to run the marathon specifically to prove to ourselves or to someone else that we can. The universe does not give mantid people a lot of leeway here. If they run the marathon because spirit tells them to do so, the experience will tend to be a wild success or provide them with something that they really needed. But if they run the marathon for an ego-related purpose, that is when they are likely to wind up injured, or something else occurs that makes them regret the decision. The mantid person's ability to do so many incredible things, therefore, is not due solely to physical or mental ability, nor even to strength of will, but to knowing on a soul level which things to do when. Developing this kind of understanding can seem a bit daunting, but once you've been kicked in the teeth a few times after following those ego drives in the presence of conflicting guidance from the spirit, you start to figure it out. Experience does tend to be the best teacher here. And I'm going to leave you guys on this particular part with the phrase, just because you can doesn't mean you should. That's a gift from my physical therapist, and it's been very valuable to me personally. Let's talk about mantid person relationships to wrap up. I'm going to insert a big caveat here first. As with all of my videos, not every quality we discuss is going to apply equally to every person or at all. That's the risk that's run when you create a symbolic interpretation for the general populace. So you could be a mantid person in every way I've mentioned, except with regard to relationships, in which case none of what I'm about to say would apply to you. And if it doesn't, just let it go. It doesn't disqualify you in any way from being a mantid person. So, mantid person relationships. It should be pretty obvious by now that trying to have a relationship with a mantid person, particularly a romantic relationship, is going to be a difficult proposition. These people are here to fulfill a sacred contract with themselves, a journey that precludes the involvement of other people. One might wonder if mantids are so antagonistic towards each other, how on earth it is that they manage to make more little mantids. One mantid species, B. borealis, has solved this issue by reproducing asexually, meaning that the female does not need a male to produce young. Although all young produced in this way will be female. In fact, every single member of B. borealis in the United States is female for precisely that reason. Some other borealis mantids, of which there are both male and female members of the species, can reproduce sexually and asexually. So in some cases, the female makes more little mantids without any male involvement at all, and in others, the male risks life and limb to contribute to the gene pool. For this reason, if you're a mantid person and you have zero interest in sex or romantic relationships, particularly if you are a woman or identify as female, you are entirely normal. Not all of us need sex in our lives. I have done tons of astrological charts for people who are just wired to find it unimportant. By the same token, if you're a mantid person and you do find yourself interested in sex, possibly very interested, and yet you struggle with intimate relationships, this is entirely normal as well. Mantid relationships are clearly extremely complicated. And the best way to begin understanding why is to talk about mantid mating. It is a vastly different experience for males than it is for females, who are considerably bigger and stronger than their male counterparts. Considerably. This wouldn't be much of an issue except for the fact that if the female is hungry, she will eat him during mating, and his comparative weakness and smaller size means that there isn't anything he can do to stop her. And now we get to the really fun part. If she intends to eat him, she will sometimes bite his head off and eat it once he has mounted her, but before copulation has begun, and his headless corpse will still do the deed. Just so we're clear here, the male does not need his head, at least not the one up here, to mate with the female. After the male body finishes its business, she eats that too. It is tempting to impose a moral explanation here, and indeed, this is just what so-called biologists did in years past, calling the mantid wanton and savage and cruel and condemning it for eating its partner for the sheer perverse joy of it rather than for hunger. However, modern biologists do recognize that females are consuming the male out of hunger, noting that leaner females are more likely to eat their mates than well-fed females, and that sexual cannibalism only happens in approximately 30% of matings, rather than being the foregone conclusion that pop science has frequently made it out to be. The motivation behind incidences of cannibalism has to do with the ootheca, the egg case that female mantids produce to protect their eggs as they mature, and which often weigh half as much as the female. The creation of the ootheca represents a considerable investment of her energy, and studies have shown that when the female eats her mate, which provides her with more energy in the form of calories consumed, the resulting ootheca is bigger. Additionally, while male mantids fly, which allows them to hunt a larger range and therefore ingest more prey, female mantids do have wings, but they're too heavy to use them. So that means they're going to catch less prey than their male counterparts in the region. So this being the case, if a female mantid is hungry and a meal falls into her lap, and particularly if she needs the calories to lay eggs, it would behoove her to eat it. It's also important to note that male mantids do not willingly offer themselves up as dinner. Larger, heavier females are approached far more often as sexual partners than leaner females, because the more zaftig females have enjoyed more frequent meals and probably aren't hungry, making them safer and therefore more attractive mates. When lean females are approached, the male does so with obvious caution and far more slowly. He is aware that she is a dangerous partner and proceeds accordingly. If he makes a poor choice and the female grabs him, he will do his best to fight to escape as she eats him. This is not a sacrificial species. Given the fact that many mantid females don't actually need a male to reproduce, and that males risk death to satisfy their sexual urges, mantid people are really only going to get involved in a relationship, most of the time, for two reasons. Either they are really in the mood to get it on, or they are seeking a creative partner and or facilitator. The energies related to creativity and sex are both centered in the second or sacral chakra, the birth of a child being as much an act of ecstatic creation as a book or a song or a painting, which required our whole being and commitment over time to produce. And so the information that applies to sexual relationships in mantid people applies equally to creative partnerships. Female-manted people tend to be a force of nature in the bedroom, where they are dominant and demanding, and they will tend to feel some contempt for their male partners, whom they usually see as weaker than they are. And in fairness, it is tough to measure up to a mantid woman who has no doubt of her own considerable power and is absolutely fearless in wielding it. This is part of what makes her so attractive. A female mantid person seeking a partner will tend to come across as no less than a dark sexual goddess, tempting men to worship her and be devoured in the process. It should come as no surprise then that she has no real interest in meeting his needs in turn, and any man who makes the mistake of thinking that she does will be painfully disappointed. She doesn't want a partner, but someone she can easily overcome and then discard when sated, so she can get back to her own concerns. Once upon a time, being powerful, sexually dominant, and demanding was the purview of the male, and society was not kind to women who attempted to claim any sexual power of their own. Today, the fantasy of a dominant woman in the bedroom is actually quite commonplace in many parts of the world. Additionally, while there are plenty of social rules governing sex, there is no cosmic decree that one must cleave to one partner alone, nor even that one must be emotionally involved with a sexual partner. Because the consequences of sex can be life-altering in terms of becoming pregnant and or contracting an illness, and because if you are emotionally invested, sharing the intimacy of sex can make the dissolution of a relationship that much more painful. It is wise to consider whether or not sex with someone is worth the risks, but you're under no universal obligation to sublimate your sexual urges in service of human morals. Now, it is in a whole different story if you are in a committed monogamous relationship. Promiscuity, unless you as a couple have consciously decided otherwise, is usually inconsistent with the health of your partnership. And female-manted people do sometimes find themselves wanting a committed relationship, usually because they have other totems that crave companionship. It happens. We all have more than one totem, at least a handful in most cases, and not all of them play nicely together, leaving us with a mess of conflicting drives that we are challenged to balance. So, how can a mantid woman have a relationship without destroying her partner or without betraying them for someone else? In the 30% of the times the female mantid eats the male, it is because the female is hungry and the male is a ready source of nourishment. If you're a female-manted person, your sexual partners may be feeding your hunger for newness or excitement, affirmation of your desirability, intimacy without attachment, or a release from the stress of the spiritual journey. It may simply be about the rush of pounding heart and sweat and the resulting feel-good hormones. Ask yourself, what are you truly hungry for? And how can you start relying upon yourself to provide it instead of your sexual partners? If you aren't needing your sexual partner to satisfy these hungry parts of yourself, you're more likely to be able to see and appreciate them as a person and to enjoy having them consistently in your life. And if you are nourishing yourself instead of relying on sex for emotional sustenance, one sexual partner is more likely to be enough. Now, as I mentioned a few moments ago, A partner may also be sought to serve as a facilitator of the female-manted person's creative endeavors, which are sure to be extraordinary. It is often the case that for an artist to create from their soul, someone else has to pay those bills and take care of the other daily minutiae of life. In ye olden days, we called this person our patron, and we have similar institutions today. However, just as in the case of a sexual relationship, the patron is likely to find that they give everything of themselves and receive absolutely nothing in return. And depending on what they thought was going to happen when they entered into the relationship, they may wind up utterly crushed by the female-manted person's endless need and lack of reciprocation. This being the case, she may go through patrons fairly regularly. This isn't wrong. It just is. If she does want to be able to retain a particular patron or creative partner, she will need to shoulder some of the burden of supporting her work herself. Her creative endeavors are likely to suffer. Remember, the female mantid is able to lay far more eggs if she eats the male, even if she isn't starving. But that is the compromise she will need to make for the sake of a long-term relationship. So, what about male-manted people? Let's go back to the male for a second. He's one, really tiny compared to the female. And two, he is fully aware that the female is likely to eat him alive and is appropriately afraid of her. In most cases, what we are looking at here is a man who struggles with confidence in intimate relationships. He often has a fear of being dominated by women, combined with considerable anger about that fear, and yet he still really craves female attention and sex. This person's mother was likely domineering, possibly even emotionally and or physically abusive, and dad was notably weak in comparison. The dynamic doesn't have to have been that extreme, but there would have been an undeniable imbalance of power in the parental relationship. Dad may have earned all the money, for example, but mom still ruled him and the rest of the household with an iron fist. And because dad himself felt inadequate as a male on account of his surrender to mom, he's likely to have transferred that anger over the inadequacy to his son, whom he made to feel inadequate in turn. Feelings of inadequacy do not occur in a vacuum. There's a lot going on in our astrological and numerological charts that contributes to them, but for them to really evolve, to be expressed to the point where they're causing you suffering, someone has to teach you to believe that you don't measure up. In men who have experienced the aforementioned parental dynamic, there can be a lot of mixed feelings and confusion around sex, most especially the idea that wanting it is somehow bad. This is absolutely untrue. Sex is a natural, normal drive, and just as I have done astrological charts for people who have no interest in sex, I've done some for folks that their charts make them all about physical sensation and the excitement of sexual relationships. This is how the universe designed them to be. Male-manted people tend to be sensation seekers, yet the relationships often don't go well due to the influence of their parents' dysfunctional relationship. It taught them to expect, consciously or unconsciously, that their own relationships would feature such a dramatic imbalance of power. When we're holding particular expectations, we tend to attract people who validate them. Male-manted people tend to fear women, and so over and over they will attract women who make them feel small and powerless, thus further validating their beliefs. It's critical, if we're to heal and grow, to recognize that these experiences are not being given to you to show you that, yep, life sucks and all that's out there are people who make you miserable, but instead to help you see how what you believe affects what you can attract so that you can begin to change your beliefs. So, male-manted people, it is not that all women are a threat, but that you've had a lot of supremely difficult experiences that have, understandably, convinced you that they are. This is tied up in a compromised sense of self-worth and deservedness, along with a perceived lack of personal power in relationships. When you believe that your needs ultimately don't matter, you're going to attract people who treat you like what you want doesn't matter. In order to connect with the kind of woman who isn't going to, forgive the pun here, eat you alive, some serious soul work is in order. Now, being a mantid person, you are probably already doing this in spades, But you may have avoided dealing with issues around your sex life because the beliefs are so deeply ingrained that you've never actually questioned that they might not be true. This being the case, it's time to confront these issues head on. Oh my gosh, I didn't realize. No pun intended there either. And to do so with the same focus and commitment with which you've examined every other part of yourself. The one thing that I can give you here with regard to healing is to be aware that if you're a male praying mantid person, the desire for sex probably exerts a tremendous influence over you, more than you likely realize. I mean, think about the male-manted, which can be deprived of his head and still complete the act of procreation. The lure of sex can be so overpowering that it can cause you to lose your head, so to speak, and then do something you really regret. This is how you get yourself into relationships with women that make you feel small or tear you to pieces. So, if you begin to feel like the downstairs brain is the only one doing the talking, take a step back. This is one of those rare instances where instead of telling us to just let go and flow, the universe is instructing you to employ some logic. You can't guarantee that a relationship is going to work. And if you try, you're never going to have one. But you can pay attention to overt red flags. Now, you're probably always going to be attracted to powerful and supremely confident women, and this is natural and healthy for you. The right woman of this type can help you level up where your own confidence is concerned. But not all of these women are going to be good for you, and it would be wise to take a few beats to do some assessing. Male-mantids approach larger, obviously well-fed females more readily, whereas they stay further away while considering thinner females, and they approach them more slowly. In the 30% of cases in which they are eaten, it is more likely to be a thinner female who does the deed. And there's a lesson here. Ask yourself if this is a woman who can take care of herself, who has what she needs, who is happy and has a rich, rewarding life. These are the kind of women who aren't going to consume you to fill their own hunger because they are perfectly capable of satisfying that hunger themselves. If your potential paramour has some obvious holes in her life, however, she will probably use you up, suck you dry, and discard you. The best relationships are those where each partner is whole in and of themselves, and as a whole person, uplifts the other and supports them in being the best and happiest person they can be. When we need someone to be something for us, we are undermining the other person's ability to be their authentic self, and eventually their unhappiness will undermine the relationship as a whole. I mean, ask yourself, how many healthy codependents do you know? And you can see why this is so important. Now, even with their cautious approach to mating, enough males are eaten to suggest that even with a sensible assessment, you're still going to have a few disastrous experiences. You'll survive, and you'll get better and better at figuring out who is really right for you. If you treat these experiences as learning experiences, and don't waste a second judging yourself for them. Ask yourself what red flag you ignored. What did you think was okay, and well, now you know from experience is not. Use this information to help you avoid these pitfalls in the future. Some of us, notably those with Saturn in the 7th house in their astrological charts, learn their biggest lessons through relationships. For this to happen, those relationships have to be tricky. Is this fun? No. Do you have a choice? No. All you can do is learn those lessons. Be kind to yourself as you do so, and try to honor your higher self more fully each time. I hope this has given you guys the answers for which you were searching. For more information about me and my work, to book a session, or to access my video library, please visit my website, www.ravenlightholistichealing.com. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Cheers!